After seeing Bad Boys Ride or Die, that means it is time to rank this entire franchise. And if you want to see my movie review on Ride or Die, the link to that video will be in the description of this video. And before we get started, just want to say one more thing. My list is not the right list, it is just my opinion, and I would love to hear your rankings of this franchise down in the comments. But without further ado, let's rank the Bad Boys franchise. Coming in at number 4 is Bad Boys for Life, and out of all of the movies in this franchise, I think this one has the most serious tone, and this was also the first movie to really put a little bit more attention on the story. And I know a lot of people liked the story in this movie, and don't get me wrong, I did too, up until we got that big reveal. Once we found out that the villain was his long lost son and the mom, Isabel, was essentially a witch, that just felt so far out of left field for me and was just so random in my opinion. I mean, the fact that Isabel was a witch in this movie was just weird for me, considering this franchise had been pretty grounded up until this point, so I just felt like that element of her character just really didn't fit this franchise and world at all. Now, don't get me wrong, I still very much enjoyed this movie. The action was great, and of course the humor was awesome as well, even though this movie did have a more serious tone than the others. Martin Lawrence and Will Smith were great together, as they always were, but for me it was really that twist that just felt so random in my opinion that really pulled me out of this thing in the end. At number 3 is Bad Boys 2. Now, I will say this is probably the funniest movie in the franchise, and yes, that is largely due to the scene with Reggie in this movie, and Reggie is probably now one of my favorite characters in this entire franchise after seeing the 4th movie. But anyways, the humor in this thing really kicks off in the opening scene with Marcus and Mike at that Klan rally, and then you have Mike shooting Marcus in the butt, and that was just a running joke throughout this entire film, which I really enjoyed. And it was just moments like that in this film that just make this thing so memorable and so hilarious. This one also had huge action sequences and big car chases that I just thought were awesome. I mean, Michael Bay really took everything they did in that first movie and just made it bigger and better in terms of action in this one, and that led us to that big shootout final act at the drug lord's house that is probably one of my favorite final acts in the franchise. Yes, the story was a bit weak. It was pretty much just stop the big bad drug lord, but at the end of the day, that really doesn't matter to me because these movies are all about the action and the chemistry between Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, and this movie absolutely delivered on that front. And to be honest, I don't really dislike anything about this movie. It was super tough to put this one at number 3 because I do like it so much, but this is just one of those cases where I like the next 2 movies just a little bit more than this one. At number 2 is Bad Boys Ride or Die. Now, you can call it recency bias, but I just really enjoyed this movie, and out of the 4 movies in this franchise, I think this one has the best story. This story was personal for both Mike and Marcus, which set the stakes and also made it easy to get invested into this thing. And I also liked how they continued some aspects from the story of the 3rd movie, like the relationship between Mike and his son. Now, in terms of Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, they have not missed a beat in terms of their chemistry. They were hilarious, but Martin Lawrence himself was probably one of my favorite parts of this movie because he was just goofy throughout this entire thing, and I thought it was just absolutely hilarious. You could really tell that the directors Adil El Arbi and Bilal Fallah really had full reins on this movie, and you could really see that in terms of the action. They did a good job at paying tribute to the Michael Bay action of the past, while also putting their own spin on it and making their own creative action sequences. They had FPV drones flying through the action, taking these big one-shots, which I thought was super cool. They had these first-person shooter shots, which were super creative and really inventive in my opinion, and I kind of nerded out after seeing the behind the scenes of how they pulled that shot off. But on top of that, the best scene in this whole movie, the best action scene in this whole movie was that scene with Reggie. It is now one of my favorite moments in the entire franchise. Adil El Arbi and Bilal Fallah added their own style and flair to this movie, and even though this franchise is nearly 30 years old, they proved that it still has a lot left to offer, and if they continue to make more of these movies, I will be seated. And coming in at number 1 is Bad Boys. Now, I don't know if it was nostalgia or what, but I just could not for the life of me put those other 3 movies over this one. This story was on a smaller scale than the others, but I still really like that because this just felt like a self-contained movie. And with them having to protect Julie while also taking down this big drug lord, I think that added stakes to the movie and it led up to a pretty solid and action-packed final act in my opinion. I will say though, in terms of banter back and forth between Martin Lawrence and Will Smith, this is probably the best we've gotten in the franchise. I found myself laughing at it a lot, and when these two were on screen together and it was just them going back and forth, those were some of my favorite parts of this movie. Also, the parts where Marcus and Mike have to play each other, I just thought that was hilarious. The action was also good in this movie, and even though it's not as big and as grand as some of the action that we've gotten in the other movies, it still did its job and worked well for this movie. So at the end of the day, this movie is a classic for me, and when it comes to rewatching all of the Bad Boys movies, this one is the one that I get most excited for. That was my ranking of the Bad Boys franchise, and let's be honest, there's really not a bad movie in this franchise. I will keep watching these movies as long as they want to keep making them, but be sure to let me know your ranking of this franchise down in the comments, and as always, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, get your Eazy Apparel at shopeasyapparel.com. God bless, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.